The opinions and suggestions expressed on the following program are solely those of the participants and not necessarily endorsed by program sponsors or any radio station, media company, or platform broadcasting this program. The following program is a product of Causeway LLC. The information in this broadcast is not intended as investment, tax, or financial advice. Matthew Moore is not a licensed investment advisor and speaks solely from his experience and opinions. All information in this broadcast is for entertainment or educational purposes only. Matthew Moore, Causeway LLC, and the company or platform broadcasting this program is not responsible for the success or failure of any person's investment decisions or purchases. Matthew Moore, Causeway LLC, and the company or platform broadcasting this program makes no and expressly disclaims all representations, warranties, and guarantees with respect to this broadcast and its sponsors. Investing in any market is inherently risky and can be financially dangerous. Invest at your own risk.
Government officials will continue to inform as this story unfolds.
Welcome to Cryptocurrency with Matthew J. Moore, the Bitcoin-focused radio show that's waking the masses to the fiat money Ponzi scheme. Money is changing, and your freedom is at stake. So stick around and learn how to empower yourself for this new digital age. Now, here's your host, Matthew J. Moore.
Welcome, America. Welcome, citizens of Earth. No matter where you are, I want to welcome you, every single one of you. Nobody's getting left out. Bitcoin lovers, newbies, and experts, you're all welcomed. You are now listening to Cryptocurrency with Matthew J. Moore, one of the only syndicated radio shows dedicated to the topic of Bitcoin in all of the land. A show where you'll learn, get this, about money, liberty, history, technology, and so much more. So you don't want to miss it, I promise you. On today's episodes, we're going to revisit some of the fundamentals of money, a crucial part to understanding why Bitcoin is so important. And I'm sure you're wondering, like, why do I care? Well, you're going to care because we got a lot of good reasons for you to care. Have you ever thought about what makes something money? What gives it value? Where does it come from? And most importantly, why is Bitcoin money? Well, if you're new to this space, you're in for some surprises because these answers just might shock you. So stick around and prepare as we reveal to you the hidden secrets of money. But before we get this show going, I need to introduce you to my glorious sidekick and co-host. His name's Eric Cooper. Eric, welcome to our first syndicated radio show, brother. We might have started this party in Tulsa, Oklahoma, but hey, we're going national now.
Yes.
You ready to create history?
I am pretty excited about this because, again, our whole goal on this whole thing was to bring education. There's a lot of things out there on social media. You're going to see commercials. You're going to see talking heads who don't know what they're saying. You're going to see politicians. So we want to bring clarity to those going, all right, so why? I mean, we've got the dollar bill. Why Bitcoin? And I think this is a great place to start off is to explain, like, what is money? What does that mean? Right. And again, I like it because why should you care? Because, I mean, I think that we can all agree that there's a little bit of a zoo going on in D.C. and so we need some help.
Well, that's right, Eric. And, I'm going to add here, also in the house is my wonderful producer, Brian LaRue. He is sitting on the soundboard, making sure we sound pleasant to the ear. He's also the genius behind our awesome intros and outros. So did you like that new intro? The guy's voice is really good, huh?
I like it a lot.
Yeah. Well, he does it all. He's literally the Meister, the Mr. Meister music himself, and he literally creates something out of nothing and blows my mind every single time. Brian, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for making us sound professional and original. You doing good today?
Hey, I'm doing great, Matt. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Well, and I might add, we're sitting here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, at the Blue Studio, and in fact, Brian, you make and mix and produce audio all the time.
Yeah.
What's your website? Tell the people about your website if they really liked our intro there.
Yeah, you can visit my website at beyondyouproductions.com. I do hosts of different services, mixing and mastering primarily, but you can visit my website, check out beyondyouproductions.com.
It's good stuff. You won't be disappointed. Eric, why don't you introduce our guest today?
That's right, Matt. Let's go ahead and introduce one of our, not only a guest, but he is a friend. He's been a regular on the show, but he's a perfect guy to have us, join us with this conversation. He is a chartered financial analyst, Andrew Ryan. Andrew, welcome back, sir. Please introduce yourself to our new radio listeners.
Thank you. Glad to be back. I got my CFA designation in 2009. Then I've been an independent commodity trader since 2011. So I have some financial market experience there. And then I got into Bitcoin, bought my first Bitcoin at the peak in 2013. So I'm really passionate about this, and I'd love to talk about it and get educated and educate.
Well, it's so good to have you back. I'm pumped to do this show with you. I mean, it's a really good idea to revisit some of these fundamentals of money, and especially during cold bear markets like this. I mean, it's a Bitcoin winter. But do you think that going over these fundamentals, introducing these ideas, because there might be some people listening to this program that have never heard of these ideas before?
Well, I sometimes tell people that if you want to understand Bitcoin, you have to understand gold. And if you want to understand gold, you have to understand money. So I think we're going to be talking about both of those and then going over the fundamentals of Bitcoin.
All right. So, guys, let's do this. The first question right out of the gate I think that we need to cover is the concept of money. Many people are unfamiliar with with Bitcoin, and they view it simply as maybe a speculative asset with extreme volatility. And we've seen that. But to those familiar with Bitcoin, it's more of a commodity-based money. So, Matt, let's start here. What makes something money in the first place? So what technically is money?
Well, Eric, it's thanks for asking, but I know Andrew's going to have some probably similar points, if not the same, but it's always good to get two different takes on it. In my opinion, money is a tool. It's a vehicle that represents our time, labor, energy, and freedom. If you were to think about it, it's essentially our life force, and in order for something to be a money, because there is a difference between money and currency. Most people don't know that, they think, oh, money and currency are the same thing. And they're pretty close. They share a lot of the same principles, things like medium of exchange, unit of account, portable, durable, divisible, fungible, which basically means interchangeable. But the one difference between a currency and a money is store value. So they've got all these same properties, but it's really the limited supply of something that creates a store of value.
Yeah, and I think that money fundamentally is just a ledger. It's a global ledger of who owes who what. And Bitcoin is the best global ledger that humanity's ever discovered. And if you go down the list of attributes that you just mentioned, being portable, being durable, being divisible, fungible, Bitcoin is better than gold on almost all those attributes. It's of course more transportable. You can send it on the other side of the world in a few seconds, but it's also, you can prove that it's real. Gold, if you bring in a gold coin to a gold shop, it's not exactly straightforward of how to non-destructively find out if that's test it, or whether that's a tungsten coin covered in gold. You go down that list, Bitcoin is more divisible than gold. It can be divided, one Bitcoin can be divided into 100 million parts called Satoshis, and that's something like 1,000th of a cent at this point.
Right.
So Bitcoin really is a better gold than gold, and it fixes a lot of problems that caused gold to not be the money it could have been in the 19th and 20th centuries.
All right. So, Andrew, why does Bitcoin meet this criteria of money? If gold is considered money due to its limited nature, then why is Bitcoin, which is a digital asset, considered money? How is Bitcoin actually limited?
Well, for the first time in humanity's history, we have a asset that is globally strictly scarce. So Bitcoin is there can only ever be 21 million Bitcoin, and that's credible because of the consensus mechanism of the Bitcoin network. And this is something that you have to read about, you have to study it to grasp the importance of the decentralization of Bitcoin and how it makes the 21 million cap credible. But unlike gold, for example, has a stock to flow ratio of about 60, meaning every year about 1/60th of the gold that's above ground gets pulled out of the ground and added to the global stock of gold. Bitcoin has an asymptotic issuance rate that every 4 years halves, and that will make its stock to flow eventually in 120 years go to infinity. And I think it'll really change our our relationship with money in the long term. And I think this is something that will play out over decades, but I think it's already starting today.
Yeah.
So Matt, obviously if gold and Bitcoin are superior forms of money, why are we still using these green and yellow cocktail napkins that seem to go down in value?
Yeah, well, we're all believing, we all have faith and confidence in this idea together. At least, I don't anymore, but most people do. And the truth is, these concepts of money and currency, they don't teach this stuff in school. No. You could say it's a giant conspiracy, or you could say it was a coincidence. That's a whole nother show to get into, but ask people what they think money is. If you go to the street and say, hey, do you know what money is? Can you define money? How does it work? What gives it value? Where does it come from? And most people might just say, hey, it's this green piece of paper in my pocket.
Some people still say it's backed by gold. Some people don't know that it's not anymore.
Yeah, it's not. No, and that's funny. Ever since 1971, there hasn't been any form of backing. So it's literally created out of thin air. I mean, it's decreed as money, forced on people by the government. And like I said earlier, it's a game of faith and confidence. And when that game is up, it all comes crumbling down. And we're in the ending stages of our current fiat money system. If people don't know this, fiat money, the dollar, it is a complete unit of debt created out of thin air, borrowed into existence, has no backing. Some people say, oh, well, it's backed by government guns. Yeah, that might be true. Ask any of the nations that tried to trade their oil in gold or tried to trade their oil in euros. They eventually got bombed by us. But hey, the excuse was a patsy. There was some other reason why we went in there. But hey, there's really, cryptocurrency like Bitcoin is a fair form of money, whereas things like the fiat dollar, the paper dollar, it's not a fair money, because in order for something to be a fair money, both parties have to spend time, labor, energy to either create it or work for it. And, Bitcoin uses a lot of energy, uses a lot of computers, uses a lot of time to create it into existence. Anybody can do it. The dollar, not so much. It's just an elite few who get to make a decision and press a button. So there's definitely a contrast. And if you don't know this, if you're listening to this program, you don't know this, 98% of the purchasing power of the dollar since 1913 it has basically eroded. I mean, it's gone. There's literally no store of value. And over the last 2.5, 3 years, we created 40% of all dollars in existence today were created over the last 2 years. And that's why we're seeing this problem with inflation. And I don't think inflation is going to go away anytime soon. I mean, it's kind of like being a frog in a boiling pot of water. I mean, it's going to be pretty bad. And we left, like I said earlier, we left constitutional money one small move at a time. People didn't notice. And then finally, by the year of 1971, President Nixon took us off any form of the gold standard. So it's pretty bad.
So obviously, my big question about this is, you're saying 1971, there was some intent. People have been watching money. Andrew, do you feel that the slow move away from sound money was intentional? Was that planned?
I don't know if it was intentional, but I think it was inevitable because gold essentially failed to back money because it's so difficult to secure, it's so difficult to transport, and it's so difficult to assay, meaning check its validity. Those things made it so that gold naturally became very centralized. People didn't store their gold coins at home; they put them in the bank, and those banks didn't want to deal with security and vaults, and so they put it in bigger banks, and eventually a lot of that gold ended up in the Federal Reserve. And in Fort Knox, and that centralization made it possible for the government to come off the gold standard in 1971.
So, Matt, it obviously, again, thought goes into this. Why did the founding fathers, the United States, decide to make gold and silver, the form of currency, right, money in the first place? Right.
Well, if you are familiar with the term "not worth a continental," that comes from the Revolutionary War when the states basically had a fiat form of money called the continental dollar, and basically it got printed into hyperinflation. And I thought, well, hey, we ain't going to do that mistake again. So in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, it basically gives Congress the power to coin money, regulate the value thereof and of foreign coin, and fix the standard of weights and measures. Article 1, Section 10 of the U.S. Constitution basically states that no state government shall coin money, emit bills of credit, make anything but gold and silver coin, a tender of payments of debt. And what's fascinating, if you think about this, based off the Constitution alone, any state taxes collected today in Federal Reserve notes or fiat dollars is unconstitutional. All state taxes are unconstitutional because they're not being collected in gold and silver, because if a tax is levied against you, it's a debt owed. Right. So that people don't think about that. But it's also important to note that, even though that the federal government was granted this ability to borrow money in Article 1, Section 8, there was actually this really significant and great debate during the ratification of the Constitution. And it was basically all around Congress being able to emit bills of credit, which is fiat money, and also a debate around legal tender. And although the Constitution or the Continental Congress had been given the power in the past with the Articles of Confederation, the Founding Fathers removed that from the U.S. Constitution before ratification. So right there we can see that Congress was given the specific power to quote unquote coin money instead of emit bills of credit. We can also see that states were not allowed to coin money nor emit bills of credit. So, they can only accept gold and silver. But the thing you got to remember, though, is people ask, well, the paper money we have today, well, that's a bill of credit. Like, it's unconstitutional, right? Well, yes, but the Congress has the power to borrow. Where do they borrow from? They borrow from a central bank that has shareholders that creates money out of thin air and puts these bills of credit out there. So, it's kind of a roundabout way of using these bills of credit. And how many federal agencies have shareholders? None. So Federal Reserve is as Federal Express.
Absolutely. So right before we hop into a break here, Andrew, the question here for you is, if gold and silver are both considered money, but Bitcoin is this new, better form of money kind of in this digital age, do you think we should own all of it, or do we just bet on Bitcoin alone? What's the smart play here, and why?
Well, I've always liked gold. Historically, just my personal journey on this. But for me, I'm not going to give financial advice to anyone because everyone has different risk tolerance and different goals in life. But for me, about 2/3 of my investable assets are in Bitcoin. I do have a significant amount of physical gold also, and of course equities. But I'm pretty gung ho about this. And I think it's for me, it's the right thing.
Right. Well, we don't have much time before we got to go to break, but I do want to remind people, right? Like the Continental dollar, all fiat money goes to zero. So these dollars that we're using today, it does have a lifespan, and you would be really surprised at the average lifespan of a fiat currency, because it's we're getting towards the end. So I don't know if Eric and Andrew, these timetables here, but 50 years, we're 50 years into this failed experiment of this whole thing called a fiat currency, and it's going to come crashing down soon. So, any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, obviously, we don't learn from our mistakes, and we've seen this, and so there's a certain amount of hubris that you see just completely ignored. But there's a lot of people, right, involved in this, and they have their current best interest at hand, and that's where it all starts with the downfall.
Right, Andrew?
Well, and reserve currencies typically don't last 100 years, and the time's taken for us.
Yeah,
so.
Average lifespan, 90 years, and we were the world reserve currency after World War II.
Yeah, call it 1944.
Right. Yeah, so it's coming to the end, but I want you guys to stay put because we got more great content, more great conversations coming your way about Bitcoin, money. Where does it come from? What gives it value? Don't move. We'll be right back. Do you enjoy listening to my radio show, Cryptocurrency with Matthew J. Moore? Have you ever thought about being featured on the show as a loyal listener? What about winning some free Bitcoin? Can't go wrong with that, am I right? Well, today is your lucky day, my friend, because we're building a community for this show. For just $15 a month, you can become a member of the radio show. And in return, you'll have the chance to win $100 of free Bitcoin and be featured on the show. Every month, we will randomly draw one name from the pool of currently paid members, and that person will receive $100 of free Bitcoin and the opportunity to be featured during a segment of the show. We will do this drawing every single month. In addition, everyone who signs up as a member today will receive a complimentary copy of the Little Bitcoin Book, a great educational read around the fundamentals of Bitcoin. Join today before we close membership enrollment. Go to mattjmoore.com/member. Again, that's mattjmoore.com/member. Do you have a strategy to obtain Bitcoin on a regular basis? Do you plan to automate your dollar cost averaging? What about getting all or part of your paycheck in Bitcoin? GetHedge.io is revolutionizing how you get paid. Hedge makes it easy to automatically convert your pay into Bitcoin. Whether you're an employer or employee, you can get started in 4 easy steps. Start getting paid in Bitcoin, Ethereum, or Litecoin. The great part about using Hedge is you can skip the exchange experience altogether and have your Bitcoin sent directly to a wallet you control. Self-custody is key, and GetHedge is giving you the power. Hedge is here to make it easy to stack those sats month after month. Bitcoin, it's a long-term play, so what are you waiting for? Start living on the Hedge, and don't forget to let them know that you heard about Hedge from Cryptocurrency with Matthew J. Moore. Use my referral link at mattjmoore.com, or you can go to gethedge.io. Again, that's gethedge.io.
Short-form video content is taking over social media, and with only seconds to capture someone's attention, our team can help you stand out from the crowd. At Sooner Marketing Solutions, we'll produce and publish engaging TikToks, Instagram Reels, and YouTube Shorts. If you feel like you're falling to the wayside and missing out on the exposure that you deserve, click the link in the description to get Sooner results now.
The sun, beaches, parties, education, and Bitcoin. This is the recipe for Bitcoin 2023, the largest Bitcoin conference in the world. Ever thought about meeting industry experts? It's the who's who of Bitcoin, and you can't miss it. Join us in Miami, Florida for the annual Bitcoin conference. Use my promo code BTC Radio at checkout. That's BTC Radio. Learn more at mattjmoore.com. Welcome back, America. It's round 2 of America's Bitcoin-focused radio show. Whether you're a Bitcoin lover, newbie, or expert, we've got something for you. So we want to welcome all of you, even the haters, because we hope you stick around because, hey, Cryptocurrency with Matthew J. Moore, it's a show for everybody. And if you haven't figured it out yet, we are one of the only syndicated radio shows dedicated to the topic of Bitcoin, a show where you'll learn about money, liberty, history, technology, and so much more. And I also want to remind you, hey, if you're listening to this show on the radio, we want you to tell your friends about it. But most importantly, if you're listening online like YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, we're literally all over the place. No matter what platform you're using, go ahead. Do me a favor. Do this, okay? Leave us a comment, like, share, subscribe, post, because we definitely want to get the word out about this show. Let us know how you feel. We want to hear from you. But hey, on today's episode, we've been revisiting some of the fundamentals of money, a crucial part to understanding why Bitcoin is so important, especially in today's monetary and political climate. We've been discussing, get this, the meaning of money, answering questions like what gives it value, where does it come from, and most importantly, why is Bitcoin money? So join us. This is segment 2. We're going to have a great conversation. We're going to reveal more of the hidden secrets of money. And to help carry on this conversation today is my faithful co-host, Eric Cooper. Eric, thanks for being here, man. You ready to keep this education train going?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is about education because, you heard a little bit about it. I think Andrew said it in the first segment, and we'll say it quite often, is you don't get to learn a lot of this stuff in school. You don't get to learn how credit cards are done, what, interest rates, taking out a home loan. And so, unfortunately, this education doesn't happen. So, if you're in the car, you're listening, this is okay to let the kiddos continue to listen because we want to educate them about money. Because guess what, Miss Eberly in 4th grade English, she's not going to talk about it.
Yeah, and we're definitely not going to do a cussing storm. So you're good. No earmuffs are required. So, also in the house is producer Brian LaRue. He's sitting next to me on the soundboard, and hey, you know what? He's going to make sure we don't say anything naughty. He's also the genius behind our awesome intros and outros. He is the puppet master himself, the shadow government of our show. He literally creates radio magic. Brian, thanks for pulling my strings, and thanks for making us sound like we actually have our stuff in order. Hey, we want to let people know, like if they heard that intro, that really cool intro, where would they find your stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. You can go online. I have a website. It's called beyondyouproductions.com. And just feel free to contact me, and I do a lot of mixing and mastering.
Yeah, man,
help
it's
you out.
so good stuff. We're also sitting here in Tulsa, Oklahoma at the Blue Studio at Sooner Marketing Solutions. That's SoonerMarketingSolutions.com. We want to thank them for letting us use their space. But Eric, I'm going to hand it off to you, and let's get this thing back on the road.
Absolutely. And then also in studio with us to help cover this topic of money is our chartered financial analyst, Andrew Ryan. Andrew, welcome back for our second segment. Please introduce yourself to our listeners.
Thanks for having me. I'm Andrew Ryan. I've been active in the Bitcoin ecosystem for 9 years, and I started the monthly Bitcoin meetup here in Tulsa. So that's my claim to fame.
Yeah, and it's a good one too. In fact, we got a really active community here in Tulsa. But Andrew, let's start back with this question. In the last segment, we talked about what makes something a money. We kind of dived into that. Have a few more points to probably make, but is it when it comes to the dollar and the value of the dollar? Is it faith? Is it something else, that the world kind of like buys into? I mean, we know we have to use dollars to buy oil around the world, so it kind of creates this artificial demand. But we're all kind of participating in this kind of like shared delusion. What's your take on this?
Well, so the U.S. went off the gold standard permanently and completely in 1971 by President Nixon. I kind of feel like it's like that Roadrunner cartoon where the coyote runs off the cliff and just hangs there for a little while. Everyone was shocked when he did that. People thought that it might collapse the dollar, but it didn't. And it didn't because the U.S. was the major nuclear superpower, had the largest military in the world, and it still did through the 80s and 90s and even today. And that's fundamentally what backs a dollar is military might. The U.S. would not be able to pull off being the world's reserve currency if it wasn't as powerful as it is.
And how convenient is it to just press a button and print some more paper in order to fund your military?
That's wonderful. and then buy oil with it, and
right,
and use that oil in your all your military vehicles and stuff. So yeah.
And Matt, so this is important because I think a lot of people they don't know how the dollar's created. So in a very simplistic way, and I'm not talking about like wood pulp and all that stuff, but can you describe how our current dollar comes into existence?
Yeah. Most people don't know this. I mean, we talked about it a little bit earlier about the Federal Reserve having shareholders and the federal government borrowing money or borrowing fake money, counterfeit money, basically from a private entity. But usually how this happens or how it starts is there's kind of this giant, I call it a Ponzi scheme, a shell game that takes place. The U.S. Treasury basically issues a bond. It's a glorified IOU. Think Dumb and Dumber IOUs, right?
That's just as good as cash. That's an IOU.
I know, right? Well, then after that Treasury, after the U.S. Treasury issues that IOU, the primary dealer banks, which are these big banks, and they buy these bonds at an auction. And by law, they've got to buy up all of these bonds. And so, if China doesn't buy them, if other people don't buy them, these banks have to buy them. Turns out, they turn around, they take these bonds after they buy them, they turn around and they sell them to the Federal Reserve, which is that private central bank with shareholders I was telling you about. The Federal Reserve creates dollars out of thin air, gives it to the banks, and buys the bonds. Basically, they're buying the bonds from those primary dealers, and presto, new money comes into existence. So, I mentioned it earlier, the shareholders of the Federal Reserve, they actually get 6% off of that money creation that the Federal Reserve makes, and it's been rumored, and some of the information is out there, that some of these shareholders are these same primary dealer banks that are buying these bonds and turning around and selling it to the central banks. So the whole process just repeats and repeats. It's kind of like rinse and repeat. But what happens is this results in a buildup of bonds at the Federal Reserve and a buildup of currency at the U.S. Treasury. So again, it's just, in my opinion, glorified swapping of IOUs created out of thin air. So since the big banks and governments are basically closest to this process, they get the purchasing power of this currency first before it actually loses money. So, and I want to add, well, there's a whole bunch of points I want to cover, but depending on how much time we have. But I want you guys who are listening to this, just think about this. This whole process gives government the ability to easily pay for unaffordable war and social programs. That's why when you hear, living within our means, paying down our deficits, the debt ceiling, all of it is just hogwash, because there has to be an ever-increasing form of debt. If you borrow the first dollar into existence and you owe interest on it, where are you going to get the second dollar to pay for that interest? Well, you got to borrow again. So, there's always more debt in the system than there is currency. And if you do pay down your debts to any substantial level, the whole thing collapses in this kind of deflationary collapse. And that's kind of the end of the game. But, to add insult to injury, the worst part of this is that you and I, we have to pay back this debt that was created out of thin air. So what happens? The IRS, which get this, the IRS was created the same year that the Federal Reserve was created. And why is that? Well, primarily, most of the income tax that is collected, it's used to pay the principal plus interest on the bonds that were purchased by the Federal Reserve with their fake money that they created out of thin air. So we're using more of our time and labor from the income tax to pay back this central bank that basically created fake money out of thin air.
So obviously, folks, the government created an issue and they found a way out of their problem, but it's just this massive cycle, and it's just crazy. But Andrew, is what Matt just described. It's called I think it's the Cantillon effect. Why is this unfair for us? And then how does Bitcoin propose to fix this problem?
Okay, so what Matt basically described is that the U.S. has a monopoly on counterfeiting, because if anyone else created dollars out of thin air, they would be prosecuted. Bitcoin, on the other hand, the way it does issue Bitcoin out of thin air, but it does it through spending a lot of energy in a system called proof of work, and those Bitcoin that get created every day. Currently, it's about 900 Bitcoin a day. They're given to the miners that put in the work and expend the energy to secure the network, which is a much more fair system than the U.S. dollar.
Right, because anybody can participate in that. Anybody can, be a miner. And what's cool is it's kind of like Andrew was saying, it's kind of like gold, where you have to expend time, labor, and energy in order to create it or find it, right? But instead of putting a shovel to the dirt, you're actually taking a computer and using energy to solve the SHA-256 algorithm. Some people will say a mathematical equation to better understand it, but it's really kind of mimicking gold in its process in a synthetic way, which I would argue is significantly better than the current system we have now, because at least it's decentralized, right? And it's not controlled by one person, party, or group, or it's an apolitical money.
Well, and the reason that the U.S. government's able to print dollars out of thin air is because it's not backed by gold anymore.
Right.
Had it been backed by gold, if they printed too many dollars, then Germany or France would send over a warship and ask for their gold back. They'd hand us dollars or treasuries or whatever. So that's the fundamental problem, is that there's no bottom, there's no foundation to the U.S. dollar or any national currency for the last 51 years.
It's the separation of state and money, which is a whole new concept for people to wrap their minds around.
Absolutely. So when it comes time to inflation, if Bitcoin can't be inflated, but the U.S. dollar can, does this create an unhealthy wealth gap?
I would argue so. I mean, those closest to the money printers, like we said, get the purchasing power of that money first. Then you got to consider velocity of money. That's where it picks up into the marketplace. The market basically identifies that there's more money in the system. So guess what? Prices, they've got to go up. So you and I, we can't buy those same assets and products at the cheaper prices like the elite did, or those who are closest to the money printer, because once they buy those goods and then that new money circulates into the system and gets down to the average Joe, well, guess what? Those dollars don't buy the same amount of goods, because the marketplace goes, hey, there's way too much more money in here. So our in my opinion, our current monetary system is a communistic. It's communistic in nature, where the monetary policy is planned and decided in advance by an elite group. The system we have today, in my opinion, is not a capitalistic monetary system in its truest form. Instead, we kind of have this thing called crony capitalism. And I actually had some quotes in my book that I'd love to read, but I don't have it with me, so I'm going to encourage you, if you're listening to this program, go to my website, mattjmoore.com. You can actually buy my Amazon best-selling book, Foundations for Liberty, and it has this whole talk, but like in a way more detailed format. It's a really good book. You can support the show. It's only $11.99. But I highly encourage you to get a copy of that.
Andrew, do you feel like in our current system that inflation is always needed in order for it to continue? Does it make sense for people to save in dollars? I doubt that the real rate of inflation is where the government actually tells us it's at, because there's a lot of people who've always been like, I think we're at a healthy 3%. I feel like we're well above 3% here currently.
Well, so is inflation necessary, or I would say that it may be necessary, it may not, but inflation is definitely inevitable in the sense that no one has ever been able to stop themselves from printing money. Not Rome, not you go through in the last 2,000 years. When people have fiat money, they always end up printing more and destroying their currency. It's just like clockwork. So we're no different.
Okay, so we're talking about money. We're talking about what it is, and there's a lot of problems with it. So, Andrew, pointed at you first. If Bitcoin's considered the answer to this inflation problem, a lot of these issues, how would you sum up Bitcoin to the average Joe?
Okay, first of all, Bitcoin takes in several different fields of study, such as economics, politics, computer science, technology, energy. Bitcoin is hard to wrap your mind around, and it takes intentional time to read books, to watch podcasts. Really, I'd say it takes hundreds, if not, let's call it hundreds of hours to really wrap your mind around what Bitcoin really is and what it could be. But I would say that if I had to sum up, I'd say that investing in Bitcoin and using Bitcoin is a way to opt out of the unfair fiat system we have. It's a way to peacefully remove yourself as much as possible. And I think everyone should educate themselves about Bitcoin and do what they can to try to escape this system that's every decade it's getting worse in when it comes to inflation, when it comes to markets not being free, when it comes to governments just taking over what used to be free markets, such as the U.S. Treasury markets. It's getting worse. So it's something I think everyone should try to educate themselves about.
Matt, how about you?
Yeah, no, I think the unique thing about Bitcoin that we're witnessing in history is it is a piece of digital information that is truly scarce, right? Most people can't wrap their mind around that because they're used to copying and pasting digital information. But Bitcoin is both money and a payment network. So Bitcoin, like I said, is digital scarcity. In my opinion, Bitcoin is valuable because it's the world's first peer-to-peer, decentralized, controlled by nobody, and unconfiscatable asset. If you could think about a form of money that has a constitution that basically doesn't have a pesky Congress that gets in the way, and when that constitution is violated, the system, basically corrects itself. So, I mean, you could say that the miners are the puzzle solvers, and then the full nodes are the puzzle checkers, and they're all, abiding by the same rules or the same constitution. But anybody can participate in it. It's built on the world's strongest computer network, and in my opinion, it's the safest and smartest tool to transfer value in a digital age. Bitcoin is personal monetary sovereignty.
So we also, and we're going to get into a break here in a second, so I'm going to make this one pretty quick, but if blockchain technology, which is at the back end of this, is one of the underlying mechanisms that make the Bitcoin work, Andrew, give me your description, and what is a listener, what do they need to know about blockchain?
Well, I would say that, first of all, Bitcoin is technical, just like email is. No one really understands how email works. It just works. Bitcoin is a similar technology, but I would say blockchain is the solution to a problem, and the problem was how do you the problem of double spending. So if I send $100 to Alice and $100 to Bob, and I only have $100 in my account. If I write checks to them, who gets the $100? Bitcoin through the blockchain solved, and through proof of work solved that global coordination problem, and it took the computer scientists decades to figure that out.
Right. Well, man, we got a whole lot more content to unpack, but I just want to let you know, if you're listening to this show on the radio, I want you to stay put because we have even more great content coming your way. And if you're listening to the show on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, or Google Podcasts, do me a favor, would you? Go ahead, share it with somebody, like it, subscribe, share, leave a post. We want to hear from you. We want you to tell us everything that you feel about this program, because hey, we might be talking over your head. We really want to hear from you. And in fact, go to my website, mattjmoore.com. If there's a topic or a question that you want us to cover, submit a message, send it to me, because we will cover it on this show. We are just now getting started. Yes, we've been doing this show for 70 episodes in Tulsa, Oklahoma, but we're now national, and people are hearing us all over the country. So I'm sure the questions are going to flood in like the flood. And guess what? We have the ARC. That ARC is Bitcoin, and we're going to be protected from that fiat money flood because all that paper is worthless. Stay put, my friends. The sun, beaches, parties, education, and Bitcoin. This is the recipe for Bitcoin 2023, the largest Bitcoin conference in the world. Ever thought about meeting industry experts? It's the who's who of Bitcoin, and you can't miss it. Join us in Miami, Florida for the annual Bitcoin conference. Use my promo code BTC Radio at checkout. That's BTC Radio. Learn more at mattjmoore.com. Do you enjoy listening to my radio show, Cryptocurrency with Matthew J. Moore? Have you ever thought about being featured on the show as a loyal listener? What about winning some free Bitcoin? Can't go wrong with that, am I right? Well, today is your lucky day, my friend, because we're building a community for this show. For just $15 a month, you can become a member of the radio show. And in return, you'll have the chance to win $100 of free Bitcoin and be featured on the show. Every month, we will randomly draw one name from the pool of currently paid members, and that person will receive $100 of free Bitcoin and the opportunity to be featured during a segment of the show. We will do this drawing every single month. In addition, everyone who signs up as a member today will receive a complimentary copy of the Little Bitcoin Book, a great educational read around the fundamentals of Bitcoin. Join today before we close membership enrollment. Go to mattjmoore.com/member. Again, that's mattjmoore.com/member. Do you have a strategy to obtain Bitcoin on a regular basis? Do you plan to automate your dollar cost averaging? What about getting all or part of your paycheck in Bitcoin? GetHedge.io is revolutionizing how you get paid. Hedge makes it easy to automatically convert your pay into Bitcoin. Whether you're an employer or employee, you can get started in 4 easy steps. Start getting paid in Bitcoin, Ethereum, or Litecoin. The great part about using Hedge is you can skip the exchange experience altogether and have your Bitcoin sent directly to a wallet you control. Self-custody is key, and GetHedge is giving you the power. Hedge is here to make it easy to stack those sats month after month. Bitcoin, it's a long-term play, so what are you waiting for? Start living on the Hedge, and don't forget to let them know that you heard about Hedge from Cryptocurrency with Matthew J. Moore. Use my referral link at mattjmoore.com, or you can go to gethedge.io. Again, that's gethedge.io.
Short-form video content is taking over social media, and with only seconds to capture someone's attention, our team can help you stand out from the crowd. At Sooner Marketing Solutions, we'll produce and publish engaging TikToks, Instagram Reels, and YouTube Shorts. If you feel like you're falling to the wayside and missing out on the exposure that you deserve, click the link in the description to get Sooner results now.
We are back, America. Guess what? It's round 3 of America's Bitcoin-focused radio show. And whether you're a Bitcoin lover, newbie, or expert, we made this show for you. So we even want to welcome all those haters, because you know what? If you are a hater, maybe maybe, just maybe, we will convince you of this wonderful tool called Bitcoin. And if not, well, you could send us carefully typed out insults. I mean, we know being a keyboard warrior is really hard today, but you deserve to be heard. So truth is, cryptocurrency with Matthew J. Moore, we're a show for everybody. So, and if you haven't figured it out yet, yes, that's right. We are one of the only syndicated radio shows dedicated to this topic of Bitcoin, a show where you'll learn about money, liberty, history, technology, and so much more. And guess what? This is all a crucial part. This whole episode, we've been talking about some of the fundamentals. We've been revisiting the fundamentals of money, which is all a crucial part to understanding why Bitcoin is so important for today's world. We've been discussing things like what's the meaning of money, answering questions like, hey, what gives it value? Where does it come from? And most importantly, why is Bitcoin money? So here we are, segment 3. We're going to continue to get this blow your mind, hopefully. And to help me dish out these orange pills known as Bitcoin is our very own Hodlnot, a.k.a. co-host Eric Cooper. Eric, welcome to part 3 of the show. You ready to keep this rocket ship moving?
Absolutely. And here's something I will say to all the listeners out there is, does not matter where the market is, we are here to educate. We have been doing this now for nearly 2 years, and we've had good times. We've had predictions at the end of 2021, like, are we going to eclipse 100,000? And now we are in a spot to where we're in a bear market, and there's a lot of people who are trying to jump ship because there's a lot of shenanigans out there. Right. But guess what? If you go, and if you're listening to us on podcasts and you want to leave us a comment, leave a question, go to mattjmoore.com. We will cover stuff because the availability of content. We're here to bring you the good stuff and not shenanigans or not try to take your money.
Yeah, we're going to break through the noise and get through all those Ponzi schemes. A lot of people are trying to take your money, but Bitcoin is definitely not trying to take your money. Here, it's also important. I got to say this. Also in the building, as always, Brian LaRue. He's sitting on the soundboard, making sure we don't say anything we shouldn't. So some might call him, I don't know, censor. I call him accountability, but he's the man with the Midas touch, the music guru himself. Brian, thanks for helping us sound great today, my man.
Hey, Matt. It's great to be here.
Yeah, man. Hey, and tell people one more time, where would they, if they liked that intro, the sound effects, the music that you made for us, maybe somebody out there has a project that they want to mix or get done, where would they go?
Well, you can go to my website at beyondyouproductions.com, and has a list of services and things that I can offer you. I'd love to be able to help you.
That's right. And we're sitting here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, recording the show in the Blue Studio at Sooner Marketing Solutions. That's SoonerMarketingSolutions.com. Boys, what do you think of this nice studio? I kind of like it.
Pretty nice. He made me an Americano right when we rolled in. That was
I know. Coffee. Talk about a good host.
It was top notch.
Pretty much. Matt, also in studio with us and to help us close out this topic is one of our favorite regulars. It's Chartered Financial Analyst Andrew Ryan. And Andrew, welcome back for segment 3.
Thank you, Eric. I'm glad to be back.
All right, let's continue with this one. We've talked about the disadvantages of fiat paper money, like the U.S. dollar. But what are some of the advantages of Bitcoin in contrast to our little cocktail napkins we fold up and put in our pocket?
Well, I would say there's several big points, but I would say a couple of them is that, number one, Bitcoin is strictly scarce, which makes it long-term it makes it valuable, and it'll make it continue to be more valuable. Bitcoin issuance forever will be 21 million. Just an interesting little side note is that if you buy a billionth or a millionth of the Bitcoin that exists, you will own a millionth or a billionth of the Bitcoin forever and ever and ever. And it's and the way the computer network is set up, it's and basically if there's electricity, if there's the internet, the Bitcoin network will always be running, and it's super resilient. It's kind of like will humanity ever exist without the internet? No, I mean, we'll have the internet forever because it's a fundamental technology about communication. The second thing on Bitcoin that's really important to understand is that it is permissionless. So its strict scarcity makes it non-inflationary. Its permissionlessness makes it non-censorable. And what that means is if you have Bitcoin, nobody can stop you from using it, from spending it. So those are just really powerful things that the U.S. dollar does not have.
All right. And, I get the question all the time. Okay, Matt, yeah, it's decentralized. It's censorship resistant. It's not going to inflate away my purchasing power, but it's still digital, even though it's, decentralized and scarce. What prevents people from, adding a new change to the code to increase the supply of Bitcoin? Well, good. I'm glad you asked that question. Actually, the answer to that question is it's roughly, I believe, 98% of all the network participants have to agree to any changes to the code that are submitted. It's actually a really high bar for any changes to be implemented, and it's all heavily vetted and made sure it's kosher before it's implemented. But here's the deal. Even if somebody were to successfully implement changes or get changes voted on or accepted or utilized by the network, there's this financial economic incentive for people not to increase the supply of Bitcoin or to vote for some kind of change like that. And then primarily that's because, well, hey, if you hold a lot of Bitcoin and somebody says, hey, just because there's a lot of new demand, we got to increase the supply of Bitcoin. Well, everybody who's holding Bitcoin, the value of their holdings are going to go down if you increase the supply. So there's actually a very high bar and a financial incentive for people to not want to do that. Andrew, would you concur?
Yeah, well, and I would say Bitcoin is uniquely decentralized among the cryptocurrencies, and that's one of the reasons that it doesn't change very much. And by the way, that's one of the reasons it's so valuable, because people value a commodity that you don't want to put a lot of your time and energy into something that will be totally different in 5 years, or you just have no idea if maybe they can change the issuance or whatever. Bitcoin is hardened and decentralized, and that's the very thing that makes it valuable, and that'll be what will make it so valuable as the world's next reserve currency.
Right. And one episode I look forward to covering attack vectors and how Bitcoin is resilient to those.
Definitely, guys. Before we wrap it up here, I want to talk about Gresham's law, because this is kind of one of my favorite parts about Bitcoin. We talked about the evolution or stages that Bitcoin's got to go through when it's going to become money, and places like El Salvador are already hopping on that. But there's also in Gresham's law, which basically states that good money will drive out bad money, and so people are going to hoard things like Bitcoin as it grows in value, and they're going to spend their fiat dollars as they continue to lose value. Does this get in the way of Bitcoin becoming a medium of exchange, or is this just normal and par for the course?
Well, I'd say you'd have to look at the history of gold to maybe get an idea of how Bitcoin might evolve. Gold, before it was a medium of exchange, it had to be valuable. Money has to be saleable, where people all over the world, all over the area that you're covering, I'm thinking way back to when people traded salt for things, but it needs to be valuable first before it can be a medium of exchange, and it has to become a medium exchange before it can be a unit of account. Right. So it takes time, but there is an evolution.
No, that's so good and so true. We got a minute before we got to close out this show, but I've had a great time. Andrew, if people wanted to find you and they liked what they had to hear, where would they go?
Well, I'm on Twitter. My Twitter handle is acryan7. So that's probably the best way to find me.
All right. Well, Brian LaRue, I'm going to try to give you the last word here. What kind of stuck out to you?
Well, a lot. There was a lot said, a lot spoken, but just, that I'm a believer. You made me a believer in Bitcoin.
I know.
And in crypto. But all to say that the value of crypto is exceedingly above fiat. So.
Right. Well, guys, this has been Cryptocurrency with Matthew J. Moore. Until next time, my friends, we will see you next week. Same time, same place. And remember, Bitcoin is changing the world. I don't want you guys to get left behind, because we're going to do this every week.
It's still early. We will continue to preach on that. It's still early. If you're not doing it yet, do it now.
You haven't been left out. So join us every week and learn how to prepare for this new digital age.
Euros are going to zero. The yen's going to zero. The Chinese currency is going to zero. It's all going to zero against Bitcoin. If you don't understand that yet, you're going to be impoverished. You're going to be on the street. You're going to be begging. You're going to be out of business. You're going to be toast.